Have you ever met someone who seemed untouchable? A storm crashes through their life, their work falls apart, people insult them, plans collapse. Yet they sit there, eyes calm like a still lake. You look at them and wonder, why? Why don't they break down? What do they know that I don't? I still remember the first time I witnessed that. It was a gloomy morning. The meeting room was boiling. The director was furious. Slammed a folder onto the table, voice sharp, "What kind of work is this? A complete failure." Do you have any idea how much damage this caused? Everyone in the room was tense, heads down, anxious. But one person, a former colleague of mine, sat with his back straight. He didn't rush to respond or scramble to explain. His eyes remained steady, as if the director's rage was nothing more than waves crashing against a rock. The foam burst and vanished, while the rock stayed still. I remember trembling as I looked at him. In that moment, I realized I was the one who was always shaken. Just one sarcastic comment could ruin my whole day. One frown from the boss could keep me awake all night. I was like a fragile leaf in the wind. But he was an old, rooted tree. From that day, a question began to haunt me. What makes some people remain unmoved in chaos, while others fall apart at the slightest breeze? Let's be honest. Have you ever gone mad just because a stranger cut you off on the road? Has a random comment from a coworker ever thrown your whole mood off? Or a cold glance made you question your own worth? We've all been there. We go through life in a constant state of reaction. A tiny spark out there can ignite a storm within. There were days when all it took was a message left unread, a call not returned. And my mind would spiral with thoughts. Do they hate me? Am I not good enough? My soul felt like a lake constantly hit by stones, never still. But then I realized there might be a possibility. What if nothing could shake you anymore? What if no person, no word, no situation had the power to move you? Just imagine, you're walking down the street. Someone throws an insult. It falls on you like a stone into the ocean, disappearing the moment it hits the surface. You lose an important deal, but instead of falling apart, you see it as one door closing so another can open. People gossip and judge, and you smile, because their words do not define you. That state might sound far off, but it's real. I remember another time, in a small cafe. My best friend had just gone through a breakup. She sat there, eyes red, gripping her coffee cup like it was the last thing holding her up. I can't take it. He left me. That must mean I have no worth. I listened, feeling the storm in her heart. And I saw myself in her. All the times I had done the same, measuring my worth through someone else's love. When they stayed, I felt lovable. When they left, I felt worthless. Then, I suddenly recalled the image of that colleague, unmoved amidst the director's fury. I thought to myself, maybe true worth never comes from outside validation. Maybe, if we can stand still inside, then nothing out there can break us. That reminded me of a deep psychological truth. The world doesn't truly hurt you. It only reflects the cracks you haven't faced. The one who calls you stupid doesn't plant anger in you. They simply touch the part of you that still doubts yourself. The one who leaves doesn't create emptiness. They just expose the void you've always carried. The world is a mirror, and what you see is often a reflection of yourself. And then, I understood. The reason my colleague remained unmoved was not because he didn't feel. It was because he had nothing left for the storm to cling to. When I realized that, a bold idea lit up in my mind. If that's true, then no one can really hurt me unless I let them. It sounds simple, but think about it. We've spent our whole lives blaming others. They insulted me. He betrayed me. Life treated me unfairly. Every sentence starts with what the world did to us. But if we look deeper, could it be that every reaction is just the result of a wound inside us, still unhealed? I still remember one very late night, looking at myself in the mirror. The yellow light cast every line of exhaustion on my face. I whispered, maybe the one who hurts me the most is me. And so, from one simple question, I began a long journey learning how to stand still in chaos, not by running away and not by pretending to be strong, but by finding a still point within, where no storm can reach. Would you like to know what happens when you start to see the world as a mirror instead of an enemy? That's when the real journey begins. I began to realize something strange. The world doesn't really touch us. It only touches the parts within us that were already there. An insult holds no real power, except that it hits a fear I haven't dared to face. Indifference can't hurt me. unless I already carry a thirst for validation. That's why two people can go through the same event, but respond in completely different ways. One breaks down, the other remains calm. Because it's not the event that defines them, but what within them responds to it. I still remember one afternoon at the office. A coworker casually said, half joking, half serious, "You're really clumsy." It was light, followed by a laugh, but my heart sank. All afternoon, my mind circled around that word, clumsy. I started questioning everything I did, wondering if I was truly a burden. Then I realized it wasn't the comment itself, it had simply triggered an old wound. A childhood memory of being told I wasn't skillful, not good enough. If that wound didn't exist, the words would have passed like the wind, but they found a place to take root and grew into sadness. Once I understood this, I started seeing every reaction of mine as a mirror. Every time I felt angry, I asked, what inside me just got touched? Every time I felt hurt, I wondered, what wound is trying to speak? I discovered that the people who upset me weren't enemies. They were living mirrors, pointing to the hidden corners within me that I had long avoided. Most people choose to run from these mirrors. When they're hurt, they turn away, blame, resent. They try to distance themselves from difficult people and uncomfortable situations, like pulling a curtain over a dirty window. But even if the curtain hides it, the stain is still there. It's only those who are brave enough to stand in front of the mirror, no matter how painful, who have the chance to discover the truth, that they are the ones who need healing. I remember one rainy day, sitting alone in a small cafe, watching the crowd rush past the window. In the sound of falling rain, I asked myself, if the world is just a mirror, then are all my anger and pain just messages from within? That thought confused me, yet it also freed me. Confused, because it meant I could no longer blame anyone. Freed, because if the root is inside me, then I have the power to change. Do you see the paradox? We often think we're hurt by the outside world, but really, the world only reflects the places inside us that are still at war. A truly confident person, when called stupid, will simply smile. Someone who has accepted themselves, when abandoned, won't feel worthless. Not because they're cold, but because they've removed the soil where those seeds of pain could grow. That day, when I watched my colleague sit calmly under the director's fury, I finally understood. He wasn't unaffected because he was stronger than us. He was calm because there was nothing inside him left for that anger to cling to. It hit, then fell away like rain on stone. This realization changed the way I saw life. Instead of seeing people who offend me as bad, I saw them as mirrors showing me my inner fears. Instead of fearing abandonment, I asked, what am I still depending on to define myself? Every triggered wound became an invitation to return inward, to sit face to face with the darkness still living inside me. But living this way is not easy. The human mind always wants to react. It wants to push responsibility outward. It wants to believe happiness depends on how others treat us, on what happens outside, because to admit that all truth begins within means we must face ourselves, and that is the hardest thing of all. The world is not the enemy. It is only a mirror, and if you are brave enough to look into it, you will see even the ugliest parts of yourself, the parts you've long denied. Others only reflect them, but you are the one who gets to decide whether to keep reacting like a leaf in the wind or to learn to stand like a rooted tree. From here, the real journey begins. To become unshakable, we must accept that everything outside is just a reflection. Once we see that, we no longer fear the world. Instead of running from the mirror, we start to face it. We begin to wipe away the dust, and eventually, we see ourselves clearly. And that is the first step to breaking the chains, to see the world as a mirror, and realize that no one but yourself holds the power over your emotions. But if everything is just a reflection, why do people still suffer so deeply? The answer lies in one dangerous illusion: control. As I began to understand that the world is only a mirror reflecting our inner state, another question surfaced. If that's true, then why do we still suffer so much? If everything is a reflection of ourselves, shouldn't inner change set us free? But reality isn't that simple. The root of our suffering, I realized, lies in one illusion: that humans cling to the illusion of control. Think back to the last time you were angry. Was it not because something didn't go your way? Someone didn't behave as you expected. A plan you carefully crafted fell apart. Life threw you into a storm you weren't prepared for. We become furious, hurt, or hopeless, not because of what happened, but because it didn't happen the way we wanted it to. I remember a close friend who invested nearly all his money into a project. He planned carefully, covered every angle, everything seemed under control. But then, the unexpected struck, and the project collapsed. That evening, I met him at a bar. He drank heavily, his eyes red, and he said, "Everything crashed because I wasn't careful enough. If I had controlled things better, this wouldn't have happened." He blamed himself, tortured by the idea that he could have controlled it all. But as I listened, a question echoed inside me. Have we ever really controlled anything beyond ourselves? People often believe that if they're smart enough, if they try hard enough, they can make life bend to their will. We want others to respect us. We want love to last. We want our careers to go smoothly. We want life to follow our plans. But life has a rhythm of its own. And every time we try to force it into our shape, the more helpless we feel. One image has stayed with me for a long time. A child trying to hold sand tightly in their hand. The tighter they squeeze, the more it slips through their fingers. We are just the same. The more we try to control, the more we lose. What we think we're holding on to is often just an illusion. The ancients used to say, "The world is neutral. It is neither fair nor unfair, neither kind nor cruel. It's simply island. Like the rain, you may call it unfortunate because it ruins your picnic, or a blessing because it waters the crops. The rain carries no intention. Only your perception makes it good or bad." I learned this truth bitterly when my father passed away. Death came suddenly, without warning. For months, I wrestled with the pain. Why him? Why not someone else? Why is life so unfair? I tried to control my grief by blaming fate. But the more I blamed, the emptier I felt. Until one night, sitting alone in a dark room, I finally understood. Life never promised to go my way. It's not against me, and it doesn't owe me anything. It simply happens. And in that acceptance, the pain began to soften. We suffer most when we believe we have the right to control everything. But the truth is, the only thing we can ever truly master is how we perceive and respond. Like two people facing the same failure, one sees it as the end, the other as a lesson. The failure doesn't change only the way it's seen. The strange thing is, when we let go of the need to control, everything begins to flow more smoothly. The more you demand respect, the more others resist. But when you remain calm, respect comes naturally. The more you fear failure, the more likely you are to stumble. But when you release the fear, creativity and freedom open up. There is a paradox. When we stop clinging, we begin to receive more. I once met a woman at a meditation retreat. She had gone through a painful divorce. For years, she tried to control her husband, his schedule, his habits, even his emotions. The more she tried, the further he pulled away. Eventually, the marriage ended. She told me that in all her efforts to control him, the one thing she never managed to control was herself, her insecurity, her fear of being abandoned. When she finally let go of the need to control others, she began to find peace. And that peace, paradoxically, made her more attractive and respected than ever before. In my own days of learning to let go, I often felt like I was drifting down a river, no longer swimming against the current. At first it was terrifying. I was so used to resisting. But then I realized, the river knows its path. I no longer needed to grip everything so tightly. I just had to learn how to glide with it. And in that glide, I found freedom. We often think power comes from control, but real strength lies in not needing control. The truly unshakable person is not the one who dominates others, but the one who no longer depends on approval, outcomes, or anything outside of themselves. When you stop needing things to go your way, life becomes lighter. And then I understood why some people can remain calm in chaos. Not because they have the power to bend the world to their will, but because they've released that illusion. They no longer need control to feel safe. They found their safety within themselves. And that is something no one can take away. If you've ever felt exhausted from trying to control everything, I'd love to hear your story. Share in the comments. When did you realize that the more you tried to hold on, the more you lost? Maybe your experience will be the mirror someone else needs right now to find connection and the courage to let go. But how do you truly stand firm in the storm? When people insult you, when life throws chaos your way. That is the strength of an unshakable mind. One morning, I was walking down the street. The air was crisp. The wind brushed my face, making me more awake. Just as I turned a corner, a stranger suddenly shouted at me, "You're useless." I froze. In that split second, I felt two opposing currents of energy inside me. One was familiar. It surged through my chest, urging me to react, to yell back, to prove I wasn't what he said. The other was quiet, like a small voice from somewhere deep within, whispering, "This says nothing about you. It only reflects him." I took a breath, relaxed my shoulders, and walked on. The man disappeared into the crowd, and I continued, calm, almost surprised at my own serenity. In that moment, I understood something. An unshakable mind isn't one that's never attacked. The world still gets loud. People can still insult you. Life still throws curveballs. But the difference is, those things no longer have the power to define you. It's like a mountain. Rain may pour, thunder may strike, wind may howl, but the mountain stands still. Why are most of us so easily shaken? Because we identify with a fragile self-image, one built through the eyes of others, through achievements, through approval. When someone insults us, it feels like a threat to the core, because we've placed our self-worth in their words. When we fail, we crumble, because we've tied our value to success. This self is like a sandcastle, by the shore beautiful, but delicate. One small wave can wash it away. Once, at a casual gathering, I overheard someone whisper behind my back, "He seems kind of incompetent." My chest tightened, my face flushed with heat. I could barely focus on the conversation. That one sentence kept echoing. That night, I lay awake, mentally rehearsing hundreds of rebuttals, hundreds of ways to defend myself. But then, somewhere in that mental storm, a realization hit me. Why did I react so strongly? Maybe it's because deep down, I still feared being incompetent. If I truly believed in my worth, those words would have had no power. That's the secret of an unshakable mind. It's not that you feel nothing, but that there are no wounds left unacknowledged. When you've faced your darkness, when you've made peace with your fears and flaws, the world has nothing left to latch onto. Others may throw stones, but they fall to the ground because there are no cracks for them to get stuck in. I once heard someone say, "Insulting a peaceful person is like shouting at a mountain wall. The sound echoes, then fades, but the mountain remains." Invulnerability doesn't come from avoiding the noise, but from knowing the noise doesn't define you. But how do you reach that state? No one is born unshakable. We all have wounds. We all have shadows. The difference lies in whether we're willing to face them. A resilient mind isn't made of steel. It is forged in the fire of facing our own vulnerability. There was a period when I began to practice this. Every time someone upset me, instead of reacting, I paused and asked, "Why am I triggered?" Someone criticized how I dressed. Instead of getting angry, I realized I was still insecure about my appearance. A client rejected me bluntly. Instead of falling apart, I saw that I was still tying my value to being accepted. Bit by bit, those reactions became mirrors, helping me recognize the shadows within. The strange thing is, the more I looked within, the less I was shaken. Like a wound exposed to sunlight, at first it stings, but then it begins to dry and heal. Each moment of self-awareness gave me back a little of the power I had unknowingly handed to the outside world. One afternoon, I sat in a park watching children play. One child had a toy snatched away and screamed in rage. The other just laughed and found something else to play with. I saw myself in both. When we cling tightly, we're like the child who cries over what's lost. But when we're grounded, we're like the other. Our joy isn't tied to any one thing. An unshakable mind isn't emotionless. It still feels sadness, still feels pain. But sadness doesn't turn into despair, and pain doesn't become a burden. It's like the sky. Storms may come, wind and rain may rage, but the sky remains intact, never torn. You are the sky, not the storm. And when you begin to live this way, something magical happens. The world changes how it treats you. People can no longer manipulate you because you no longer need to prove anything. They can't break you because you no longer give them the power to define who you are. You become different, not because you are stronger, but because you no longer need others to confirm your existence. That is the quiet strength of an unshakable mind. It doesn't shout, it doesn't boast. But when people encounter it, they feel something immovable. And sometimes, that stillness becomes the greatest teacher of all. But is this kind of peace something you can train? Or is it only for a few? The answer lies in our habits of reaction and the brain's ability to rewire itself. One time, I was sitting on a bus next to a boy around 12 years old and his mother. Throughout the ride, the boy kept peeking out the window, shouting with excitement whenever he saw something new. But with just one frown from his mother, he immediately fell silent, head down. I noticed he didn't have to think long. That reaction was almost automatic, as if it had been programmed into him. And suddenly, I realized we are the same. Most of our emotional reactions in life are not conscious choices. They are deeply wired neurological habits. When someone insults us, the brain instantly switches to defense. When we're rejected, we immediately feel hurt. These neural pathways were shaped over years of repetition, so much so that we're no longer even aware of them. We think we're responding to the world, but really we're just walking old trails. I remember one situation at work. A colleague gave feedback that my report had several weaknesses. It was just one sentence, but I instantly felt my face flush, my heart race, and my mind scream, "They're looking down on me. I need to fight back." It all happened before I could think. It wasn't really me choosing that reaction. It was my brain running a script written during years of feeling like I had to prove my worth to be respected. This reminded me of a line from psychology. Emotional reactivity is a habit. The more we let the world control our emotions, the deeper those neural paths become, like a small stream that, over time, turns into a river. The more we react, the easier it becomes to react again. And before we know it, we become prisoners of our own nervous system. But fortunately, the brain is not a fixed block of stone. It's plastic neuroplasticity. That means we can form new pathways. We can train ourselves to respond differently. And gradually, calmness can become our new default. I started testing this with small exercises. When someone cut me off in traffic, instead of honking and cursing, I took a deep breath and told myself, this is just practice. My heart still raced. The frustration still rose, but I let it pass without acting on it. At first, it was uncomfortable, like holding back a wave. But the second, third time, it got a bit easier. Like lifting weights, the muscles tremble at first, but grow stronger with repetition. One night, after a client turned me down, instead of spiraling into thoughts like, I failed, I'm worthless, I paused and wrote on paper, this is an old reaction. It's not the truth. Writing it down helped me step back from the emotion. And slowly, my brain began to learn a new habit not to tie my worth to rejection. I later came across a neuroscience study. When we observe our emotions, instead of reacting, we activate the prefrontal cortex, the area responsible for self-awareness and regulation. In that moment, old neural paths start to weaken, and new ones of calm and observation are strengthened. In other words, each time we choose to pause rather than explode, we are literally rewriting our brain. This made me think of a metaphor. The brain is like a forest. If you keep walking the same trail, it becomes a path, and grass no longer grows there. But if you start walking a new way, over time, the old path gets covered again, and the new one becomes the main road. Emotional habits are the same. We can create new trails in the mind. After a few months of steady practice, I noticed a clear shift. A colleague gave me sharp feedback again, but instead of reacting, I paused for a moment and said, "Can you point out specifically what needs improvement?" That reply wasn't me faking calm. It came from a mind that no longer felt the need to explode. I was surprised at myself. And the interesting thing is, that calm response softened the whole conversation. My colleague lowered his tone, and the discussion became much more constructive. I realized that when I react less, the world also becomes less tense. Like a game of tug-of-war, if you let go of the rope, the tension disappears, and the struggle ends. I didn't change my colleague. I changed myself. And that changed the situation. What I learned is this: an unshakable mind is not a miracle born overnight. It's the result of training new responses, building new neural pathways. At first, you will tremble. It will feel like standing against a wave of instinct. But eventually, you will discover a precious space, the gap between stimulus and response. And in that space, you will find freedom. That freedom doesn't come from the world stopping its attacks. It comes from no longer being a prisoner of old habits. People can still say what they want. Circumstances can still shift unexpectedly. But within you, a new path now exists, the path of calm, of awareness, of choice. One evening, I was journaling and wrote this line. Today, for the first time, I didn't get angry when someone insulted me. I just observed it and watched it pass like a drifting cloud. Small as it was, it marked the birth of a new road. But why, even after all the practice, do people still suffer? Because we're still tied down by one invisible thread attachment. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror after a sleepless night. My face looked gaunt, eyes sunken, wrinkles clearly etched. In that moment, I suddenly laughed. Not because I looked beautiful, but because I realized how absurd it would be to get angry at the mirror for simply reflecting the truth. A mirror doesn't create the image. It only shows it. And right then, it hit me, life is the same. When someone insults us, we get angry. When we're ignored, we feel hurt. When we fail, we fall apart. We blame the world as if it's cruel. But in truth, the world is just a mirror, showing us our fears, our fragility, our hidden wounds. What hurts us isn't the words or the event, it's the part inside us that gets touched. I remember meeting an old friend. He told me about a party where someone had made fun of his height. It was just a joke, but he couldn't stop thinking about it for a week. He avoided crowds, stared into the mirror for hours. "Why does this bother me so much?" he asked. I looked at him and understood what caused him pain wasn't the joke, but the identity he had attached to being less than. The world had only mirrored that insecurity back to him. The truth is, we suffer most when we cling to things that were never truly ours. We tie our self-worth to praise, respect, love, or success. And when those things falter, we falter with them. We are like someone tying themselves to the wind, hoping it will keep us grounded. But the wind is ever shifting. How can it hold us steady? There was a woman I once knew who couldn't move on after her marriage ended. She told me, "He left me, so I must not be worth anything." That sentence weighed heavily on me, because I knew her value was never in his actions. But she had tied her identity to that love. And when it vanished, she felt like she vanished too. It's like standing before a mirror. If you believe you are the reflection, then any crack or distortion will send you into panic. I used to be like that. When work went well, I felt meaningful. When I failed, I felt useless. When praised, I was elated. When criticized, I collapsed. My whole life was like a puppet, the strings in the world's hands. One glance could lift me, one word could tear me down. Until I realized the problem wasn't the strings. It was that I tied myself to them. There's a metaphor I love. You are the sky, not the storm. The storm may come with wind and thunder, but the sky never breaks. It simply holds the storm, then lets it pass. And yet, most of us mistake ourselves for the storm. When we're angry, we say, "I am anger." When we're sad, we say, "I am sadness." But the truth is, we are the vast sky, and emotions are only passing clouds. When we understand that, we no longer cling to every gust of wind. One afternoon, I was walking through a park. A child fell and screamed in tears. His mother ran over, picked him up, and said, "It's okay, just a little fall." Watching that, I thought life is like that too. When we stumble, we often think it's the end. But with a different perspective, it's just a small fall on a long journey. Suffering comes from the beliefs we cling to. I must not fail. I must be perfect. Those beliefs are the real chains, not the events themselves. I realized to become unshakable, we don't need to eliminate emotion. We simply need to stop identifying with it. When someone insults you, you might still feel a sting, but you don't let that pain define you. When you experience loss, you may still feel sad, but that sadness doesn't become despair. It's like watching storm clouds gather, knowing they'll pass, and the sky is still there. Now, when I look in the mirror, I no longer want to smash it if the reflection bothers me. I just smile, knowing the mirror is only doing its job. Life is the same, simply reflecting. And that reflection, if we're brave enough to face it, can be our greatest gift. It gives us a chance to see who we truly are, to see where we're still attached. And you know what happens when we let go of those attachments? The world loses its power over us. People may change, situations may shift, but we don't get shaken because our roots aren't out there, but in the stillness within. That is freedom. Not freedom from the world, but freedom from the chains we've unknowingly tied around ourselves. So, how do we step fully into that unshakable state? How do we live like the sky, watching the storms without being swept away? That is the journey of presence. There's a moment I will never forget. It was a quiet autumn afternoon, and I was sitting alone by the river. The water flowed gently, waves drifting past without a trace. I dropped a leaf into the stream and watched it spin, at times rushing forward, other times getting stuck on rocks, then breaking free and continuing its journey. In that silence, I realized I was like that leaf, carried by life, rising and falling, joyful and sorrowful, full of hope, then full of disappointment. But what mattered wasn't the river or the wind. What mattered was this: deep down, I was not the leaf. I was the one watching it. Being unshakable doesn't mean freezing your emotions or pretending nothing matters. It begins with a subtle shift from identifying with your reactions to becoming the one who observes them. Every time a feeling arises, anger, fear, pain, instead of following it blindly, pause for a moment and look at it, like a scientist observing an experiment. Just a brief pause, but in that pause, there is freedom. I remember once being misunderstood by a close friend. Her words cut like a knife. In the past, I would have reacted instantly, defended myself, maybe even ended the friendship. But that time, I sat in silence, feeling the ache in my chest, letting it pass through me. I asked myself, what wound in me is being touched right now? And I saw it: an old fear of abandonment from childhood. Once I saw that, the anger dissolved, and in its place came gentleness. I no longer saw her as the one causing pain, but as a mirror showing a part of me I hadn't embraced. The world stayed the same, but I had changed. And when I changed, reality shifted. A philosopher once said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." I felt that truth deeply. Every discomfort, every trigger, is an opportunity for reflection and growth. Instead of avoiding those moments, we begin to be grateful for them because they give us the chance to train our minds into something unshakable. But how do we truly enter that state of presence? I learned a few small principles like compasses on the path. First, always remember, you're never reacting to the world itself. You're reacting to how your mind interprets it. A stranger looks at you coldly, you can interpret it as, they're judging me, or maybe they're just tired. Same moment, different meaning, different reality. The root is never out there. It's in how you see. Second, make observation a habit. When an emotion arises, instead of merging with it, step half a step back and say, this is anger rising. This is sadness showing up. Just naming it creates space. The emotion is no longer I. It becomes something passing through. And when you observe, you become the sky, not the storm. Third, practice letting go of attachment. You don't need compliments to feel worthy. You don't need control to feel safe. You don't need success to feel enough. When you stop clinging to these illusions, you become truly free. And that freedom is the real foundation of an unshakable mind. I remember one conversation where a friend asked me, "How can you stay calm when everything around you is in chaos?" I smiled and told him about the sky. I said, "See those clouds? Sometimes they're dark, sometimes white, sometimes they vanish. But the sky is always there. We are the same. Once you realize you're the sky, the clouds lose their power." He sat quietly, then nodded. I saw something in his eyes, like someone seeing a new path for the first time. The strange thing is, when you live in that presence, the world begins to respond. People no longer manipulate you so easily because they sense your grounding. They can't trigger explosions in you because you carry no explosives inside. In fact, they begin to come to you seeking peace in your stillness. And you realize that real power doesn't come from controlling others. It comes from mastering yourself. This path isn't always easy. Some days, you'll slip into old habits. You'll get angry again, feel lost again. But when that happens, don't punish yourself. Treat it as another moment of practice. Like learning to play an instrument, no one masters it overnight. But every wrong note still brings you closer to harmony. And one day, you'll notice that calm no longer feels forced. It's become your natural breath. You'll walk through situations that once made you rage, and now you just smile. You'll face loss. And though sadness is still there, it rests on a deeper layer of peace. You'll see that no matter how wild the storms outside, Inside you, there is a sky that's never been touched. That's when you'll understand what it means to live with an unshakable mind. Not emotionless, but free. Not cold, but fully present. And in that presence, you'll find a strength that no storm can ever carry away. And I want to leave you with one final line as an echo for your journey ahead. Master your reactions, and you master your reality. Because in the end, the world will always change. But the one who decides whether you live in chaos or in peace is you. We've walked a long road together. From those first moments when we were like trembling leaves in the wind, easily swept away by a glance, a word, a minor event, we learned to pause and reflect, to realize the world never truly hurt us. It only mirrored the wounds we carried within. That mirror, whether we welcomed it or not, kept reflecting until we found the courage to face it. We've also uncovered the illusion of control, the exhausting belief that if we just held on tightly enough, we would be safe. But the tighter we held, the more we lost. Only by letting go did we discover that the river flows on, and real strength lies in learning to flow with it. Then we ventured deeper into the soul, into the space where our fragile self-image used to break under the weight of words and rejection. We came face to face with our shadows, the fears, the shortcomings, the shame we hadn't yet embraced. And in daring to look at them, the wounds began to close. Old reactions began to dissolve. Our brain, through patience and repetition, began to carve new paths from reactivity to calm, from unconsciousness to choice. And in the end, we discovered our true nature. We are the sky, not the storm. The storm may roar, but the sky is never torn. Presence became the key, the ability to remain still, to observe, rather than be swept away. And in that presence, we stepped into freedom. Freedom from attachment. Freedom from the need to control. Freedom from dependency on the world. You may not reach that state tomorrow. But what matters most is this: you now know the way. Every time you choose to observe instead of react, every time you let go instead of clinging, you take one step closer to becoming unshakable. And one day, you'll realize that in the heart of chaos, you're no longer a leaf in the wind, but a rooted tree, steady, silent, and full of quiet power. Because in the end, the only thing you truly need to master is yourself. And when you do, the world will begin to change with you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this story. If this message touched your heart, please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you'll never miss the next journey we take together. Your support means the world to me.